everyone. Thank you for joining us again today for our third episode of Let's Talk About Race and the Church. Today, our topic is pastoral approaches to race and the church. But before we get started, I just want to ask you guys, how are you doing today?
Good, feeling good. Sun is shining.
I'm also good. The sun is definitely not shining where I am, but yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation again today.
That's great. So who wants to kick us off first today?
I guess I can start us off with our first question, which would be, who should be responsible for providing safe spaces for race conversations?
I think, just from my opinion, if we're talking about this specifically in a church context, then I think it's something that is important for the church leadership to be aware of. And it doesn't all have to be their responsibility, but I think they can kind of set the culture of the house. And if they are creating that place as somewhere that's safe for us to talk about race and culture, I think it kind of needs to start with the leadership, and then kind of the other leaders and other people will pick it up from there.
Definitely, I agree. I would love to say that it's everybody's responsibility and everyone has a part to play, but until we get to a place where people are educated enough and people actually have awareness, a greater awareness of race inequality in the world and in the church, it does have to kind of rely upon the leaders to educate themselves and take that upon themselves. But I think even for the churches that have the numbers, why not take it a step forward? So for example, churches will often have people like family liaisons. So why not have a diversity and equality liaison, so someone whose job is designated to do that? Because I think leaders often have a lot of things that they have to do. And if we put another thing, then that can get overshadowed by all the other important things that they have to do. Whilst if you have someone whose role is to ensure diversity and race equality in the church, then it will ensure that is covered and that is talked about.
I think that's a really good point, because so many like companies and just different places have that as part of their organization. So why can't we have that as a church as well? I think that's a really good point, Kim.
I definitely agree with everything you guys have said. I recently listened to a similar forum conversation about race relations in the church, and somebody said a quote like, "If there is mist in the pulpit, there will be fog in the pews," in a sense that if you are not going to make it clear behind the pulpit what our views should be on this issue, then your congregation, unfortunately, is not going to have that like same understanding. Like, it is your responsibility, because at the end of the day, like, we are teachers, so it is your responsibility to teach your congregation and teach them in a godly way. I think we shouldn't rely on people to go outside and get their views on this conversation from outside the church, but it should be our responsibility to take the driver's seat and let people know what Jesus thinks about this, and ensure that our congregation and members in the church know it from a biblical perspective. But this is not necessarily like pastors and vicars, I learned that they're called also, but also maybe like small group leaders. Like if you run like a student group, if you run a small group of people who come to your small group, also take that responsibility to teach people, even if you may not have a diverse attendance. It may just be like everybody from one race, but I think still take it upon yourself to create a safe space for everyone to talk.
So I was just wondering if I could just get your guys' opinions. So speaking as a white person, is it okay for me to talk about this topic? Do we have a right to talk about something that doesn't directly affect us?
That is a loaded question, and it's definitely a controversial question where I think a lot of people have different views on it. But for myself, I would say yes, definitely. For starters, the majority of kind of race inequalities that we see in the world were started by white people, and they're also perpetuated by white privilege to this day. So I think that it's important for people to acknowledge that. Just as I acknowledge my privilege as being someone who lives in the UK and who has a free education and the history that I have, I think it's good for everyone to acknowledge the different privileges that they have in life. And for white people, it's important to acknowledge white privilege. And then I think that not even just as a white person, but also as your identity as a child of God, that it's important for people to speak out about these things. So one of my favorite Bible verses, let me just get it up quickly, is a verse in Proverbs chapter 24, 11 to 12, and it says, "Don't hesitate to rescue someone who is about to be executed unjustly. You may say that it is none of your business, but God knows and judges your motives. He keeps watch on you, he knows, and he will reward you according to what you do." So that verse says, no matter who that person is, their race, their color, whatever, we should always be prepared to speak up against any injustice that we see. As a child of God, that is your duty. And you might be worried about getting it wrong. I know a lot of my white friends will come to me and say, "Oh, Kim, but I don't want to offend anyone." And I just say to them, don't worry. If you offend someone and they say, "I don't like that you said it like this," then just learn that and keep going, keep speaking, allow yourselves to be corrected, and take that journey forward.
I definitely agree with Kim. That is such a powerful question, and I think it is one that I've heard a lot of my white friends ask me before. And I would say that we don't need to understand what it's like to be in a situation in order for us to empathize and to want to take a stand. I actually heard a really good imagery put across by this pastor who, if I remember his name, I will plug him. But he basically said, so this is my hand sanitizer bottle. What do you guys see? Well, obviously you see the word hand sanitizer. From the back here, I don't see that. I see plain, soft direction for use, wet hands thoroughly with gel, rub over. So we are looking at something from two different sides. In order for you to understand what I am saying, you are going to need to get up from looking at the front and come and see from this side how we are experiencing life. And I would say, even if you don't understand it, make an effort to see, make an effort to inform yourself, because the truth is that there's a lot of things I don't understand either. And if I'm very honest, there's sometimes I even feel like, do I have a right to talk about this conversation? Because I understand that I'm also very privileged to have grown up in an African community where my identity was affirmed not only as a Black woman, but as a child of God from birth. So I was not put in a box. I was told that I could be whoever I wanted to be. I was told to aim for the stars. I was told how much God loved me. And when I come here, I unfortunately have met friends who have grown up in a Western setting where they were the only Black person in a mile radius, and they did not have that affirmation. Therefore, whereas my experiences with racism have been somebody calling me names on the side of the road, or maybe someone saying something to my face about the way I looked that really hurt me, their experiences have been them being beaten up at school, have been them watching their family members, go to jail. And so sometimes I will reach that conversation, and even myself as a Black woman will feel, do I have a say in this if I don't understand their hurt? Like, I will really struggle with that. Like, do I have a right to talk about this if I don't have that deep level of pain that you do? But I think it's just about remembering that we will never understand, like whether it's with race issues or whether it's with any other issue. I might not 100% understand what someone is experiencing, but maybe I need to allow room in my heart to feel for their pain. I need to see beyond the labels of black, white, and look at the hurt. And even I would say this, even as like we watch the news, like sometimes I will talk to people, I'm like, I'm not asking you to have a political view. I'm not asking you to align with any politician. I'm not asking you to agree with everything that you see on TV. But I'm asking you to sit back and say, why are these people hurting? I'm asking you to look at the pain and look at the tears that people are trying to convey. And I think that's the message. You don't have to agree with methods. You don't have to understand. But as a Christian, if there's a pain and there's an injustice, like that's what, I hope I'm making sense. Like that is what we're supposed to, that's what we're here to do. And I think it's really sad because in the secular world, there is a lot of push for, no, if you don't get it, don't talk about it. But I think as Christians, we can't afford to take that position because truth be told, Abby, before you're white, you're a child of God. Before I'm black, I'm a child of God. So my identity is first and foremost as a citizen of heaven and as a child of Christ. And that is the position we take as brothers and sisters in Christ. So that when we look at things, you're not saying, oh, I'm coming as a white. I mean, I guess you are still white on earth, but am I making sense that coming from it like I am Jesus' ambassador here on earth before I'm anything else. So what am I going to do to ensure that everybody around me feels his love? I hope that made sense. Thank you.
Yeah, that really does make sense. Thank you both so much for sharing your opinions on that. I find that really helpful. And just as you were speaking, I was thinking like there are so many issues in the world that actually I don't know anything about, like human trafficking or homelessness or just poverty. Like there are so many people who are in different situations, but just because I don't know what it's like to be them, it doesn't mean I shouldn't talk about it, like you're saying. And I feel like especially with race, if white people don't talk about it as well, then it can become a very much like a black issue or a white issue, which creates even more segregation in a way. So it is something that we all need to talk about and try and understand to a level, even though we're not going to know what it's like to be in that position, but just to understand what it's like for you to be in that position and just to be able to talk about that.
Definitely. And before we move on, I want to encourage you, Abby, and say that you are so good about talking about these things, because even though it might be difficult to find the right words to say, you're still providing safe spaces for people to come and have conversations with you about it. And you're always learning and you're always just approaching things with complete love in your heart. So yeah, go, just encourage you. If anyone wants to learn, come watch Abby how she lives. So just moving on to the next thing. So this question kind of stems from a discussion that I was having with someone. And in that discussion, the person said, when I asked them about their experiences with pastoral care and race, they said, overall, my experience is positive. I never felt like I was pushed into doing anything I was uncomfortable doing. However, I often felt like I had to make more effort to fit in. Church is people, and people have culture. As much as we like to think otherwise, we cannot separate church from culture. Being in a church whose culture was different to my own was at times difficult. Whilst my spiritual needs were met, some of my other needs were not, and I felt like I had to go outside of the church to address them. So I wanted to ask you guys, why do some churches struggle to support the wider needs of their BAME members?
I think probably just from my perspective, I think churches probably don't realize that they need support. So if I just think of my position as a student leader, I don't look and think, okay, we've got people from this race, like this nationality or anything. I just see everyone kind of as one. And I feel like probably a lot of church leaders and staff would be in that position where they're not looking at people for their colour, which is a good thing. But with that, I think that means there can be aspects that are overlooked. And so I think probably there's not the understanding and just the knowledge of the needs that need to be met and the support that they actually need.
I definitely agree with Abby, and I also want to echo that I just don't think that the churches are aware that the BME needs are different from their own. And I say this with all due respect. I feel like in society today, let's say in most Western countries, I hope this is not a generalization, but I can say that the experience of a white person is grossly different to the experience of a BME individual. But I feel like a lot of times you will have one experience of life and you will assume that it is the same for everyone around you. Like, you won't take the time to think, I wonder if it's different for other people. I wonder if other people get treated differently. So I think maybe there's that just general baseline ignorance, if I can call it in the most respectful way, in our society, and the lack of understanding of actually what do they need and what are they not getting in society and what can we offer them. And I think that question cannot be answered if we're not willing to now understand, okay, what do I have that they don't have, or what do some people get that they don't get, that we need to create an atmosphere of equality, if that makes sense. And yeah, I would just say that that's mainly what I think is like, we don't have that awareness. So I think that that is why churches are unable to support. And just like giving a small example, like watching the riots that came out of America, and this is no, like, I'm not really calling out anyone, so please, my friends, everyone, if you watch it, I love you. But I'm just generally saying, like, when when that viral video of George Floyd came out, I remember I had one white church friend that wrote to me, and this is just being very honest, to ask me how I was coping with that, and who asked me that I didn't even know that this was the situation. How were you coping? And in that moment, I had wished that people who were responsible for my spiritual growth and maturity would have been the ones to reach out to me, because I was here sitting in my bed thinking, again, are you serious? Like, we are being killed on camera again. And like, you know, people were kind of like upset. People didn't understand why others were upset. Like, and for me, I remember refusing to watch that video because I remember I was like, I've seen time and time again the justice system treat Black people differently, and I've not really felt like somebody outside the Black community has reached out to me to ask me, how does that make you feel as a young Black woman, seeing somebody who could potentially be your father? Like when I deep it that way, like, could potentially be my uncle, my father, being treated such a way, like being dehumanized. Like, I would have wished that somebody asked me how I was doing in a church. And I think it's about, like, yeah, I would say that maybe some church leaders, maybe it's like we haven't set a scene for people to be comfortable, so maybe nobody even knew that they could reach out and ask me that. But it's about realizing that race relations is a big word given to a sin problem. Like, you know, let's be honest, like, this is this kind of hating of other people because of skin color, it's demonic. Like, it's horrible. That causes you to, you know, hate and kill people. It's ridiculous. And it's the same evil that we all know powers all other sins in the world. So why do we have that hesitation when it comes to talking about this? You know, why do we have that kind of like, oh, I don't want to go there, if we know that it's the same enemy as, you know, it's the same enemy. So maybe just removing that, like that fear, and just reaching out to hurting somebody and being like, hello, how are you? How are you doing? Help me understand you as somebody that I'm spiritually, I don't know if spiritual authority, is that a thing? Anyway, I don't really know my church terminology, but basically, like, if you're the person who's helping somebody in their spiritual growth, then be able to remove the terminology and be able to ask this individual, wow, okay, I see Black people are on the streets, white people, a lot of people are on the streets. How are you feeling? How are you? And maybe just don't be afraid to ask those questions. I don't know. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Melissa. But I was just wondering, in light of what you said, how did that situation actually make you feel, if you don't mind sharing?
So if I'm honest, I feel like at the beginning, like, I just didn't want to watch it. In the midst of the pandemic and everything that was going on, I was kind of like, I didn't want to remember that this was something that was happening. But when I then went on, I honestly think it broke my heart. Like, I had reached a point of past anger. Like, I was like, we're in 2020 and this is still happening. I think for me, it was more like, I just, like, you know, you almost feel helpless. Like, I remember sitting in my bed and being afraid to go to the shop, which sounds so weird. Not something that I can explain to someone else, but it was almost like, I don't know how to explain it, because now you just start thinking, your head starts running through all the cases you've heard of Black people being treated this way. And I was thinking, wait, what if people have a view of what's going on and they make a comment to me and I'm not emotionally ready to have that conversation? So I remember being afraid. I remember just wanting to come back to Africa. I just did not want to be in a place where this was happening. But in a sense, I felt so helpless. Like, you know, I felt like I just felt helpless. I saw in the news how, like, you know, some people were trying to destroy this man, and the conversation, it was taken away. It became so political, and I was like, guys, can you see that people are hurting? Like, can you see that for somebody to come out to the streets in the middle of a pandemic is not a joke? Like, we actually know this thing is killing people, but people are ready to come to the streets because they're tired. Like, and not even to go on, but I remember, like, I don't have any views on this, so I don't really want to be checked. But I remember there was a statue in Belgium that was taken down of a leader, and people were so upset that this leader, they were like, oh, how can he be taken down? But I grew up learning that this leader was the guy who used to put young Black girls that look like me in cages, like animals. And people are fighting for the fact that his statue has been torn down, who's killed over hundreds of millions of Africans. And it's just perpetuating this. And you just, like, it's not even anger. I think it's just heartbreak. And I think a lot of the heartbreak comes when you don't even feel like you can have the conversation because you don't know if people are listening. Like, you're hearing me, but are you listening? Like, do you know how, like, I just think I was heartbroken. I don't even think I knew what to say, and I've just really gone over, but it's just like, I don't know. Kim, do you have any views? Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you for sharing that, Melissa. Like, it's just listening to you speak and how you speak, it just brings me back to all the emotions that I felt in that time, because it is traumatizing. I don't know if anyone has ever had to watch someone die online that looks like you. And not just once, but repeatedly. Like, this isn't the first incident. Videos like this have been circulating for so long, and it is traumatic to have to go through that. And I so relate with the emotional experience and then the fear that someone is going to ask me about it, and not knowing whether in that time I will be emotionally stable enough to answer that. And I think that what you said about it, people politicizing it, I don't know if that's the right word, is so right, because that is all I've been seeing on the media. It's been politics about Black Lives Matter, about the organization. It's been politics about Democrats versus Republicans and this versus this, and people rioting and looting, using this experience as opportunities to do things like riot and to loot, not for the cause whatsoever, just because they want to. And seeing all of that happen, yet, like what you were saying, thinking that isn't the point of this. Are you not looking at these people who are being brutally attacked and feeling sorry? Even if it's not empathy, are you at least not looking at these people and feeling sorry for them and thinking, how is this happening to a whole race of individuals, rather than politicizing it? And it's even worse that it's happening in a pandemic, because now people are looking at protests and they're saying, oh, these protesters, we're going to get a second wave because of X, Y, and Z, instead of thinking, it must be so bad that people are having to risk their lives going out to protest rather than staying indoors. I went with my mother. My mother is a vulnerable person. She has an underlying health condition, yet even her, she couldn't stay behind. She had to go and protest. She said, there's no other way, because if my condition kills me, then if it's not my condition, then it's that person, it's that police officer, it's the system, it's the doctors that don't listen to the pain that Black women experience. It's X and Y. So.
Well, thank you both so much just for sharing that and being so vulnerable. And I feel just really taken aback by the passion that you both carry about this topic. And so I'm so grateful that you're both speaking up about it and not just letting that passion be inside of you, but you're really sharing it. And if I could just take it back to the original question that you asked him about what support, why do BAME members feel unsupported in church? And so I want to ask you guys, what support do you feel that they would need? Like, what can we be doing to support these members?
I want to go to the Bible because it's always helpful. And this story was very eloquently explained by Dr. Tony Evans, who I really appreciate and admire as a man of God. And he, so I'm just going to read in Galatians 2, verse 11. And I'm going to read from the Good News Bible, and it says, Paul rebukes Peter at Antioch. And it says, but when Peter came to Antioch, I opposed him in public because he was clearly wrong. Before some men who had been there sent by James arrived there, Peter had been eating with the Gentile brothers and sisters. But after these men arrived, he drew back and would not eat with the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who were in favor of circumcising them. The reason I want to bring up this story is, for the first part, is when he said, but when I came to Antioch, I opposed him publicly. I think sometimes we think that Christianity is not confrontational, but sometimes I feel like it is necessary. I would definitely ask people in your homes, in your friendship groups, in your work circles, if somebody says something, this is like, because as a church, we're not just in the building. That is you when you walk out into your workplace. If you're a grocery, if you're a teller at Tesco, if you're a bank assistant, if you do braids and cornrows down in Cardiff Bay, like wherever you are, like if as a Christian, you are the church, you are the representation. And if you hear somebody, please be like Paul. And he said that I opposed him in public because he was clearly wrong. When you see someone say something about another race, this is the first thing. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't keep quiet, because this is why things continue. If people are never confronted, then it never changes. Like, it never changes. And you might think, oh, it's harmless. He's just saying this in this group, or this person is just saying this in this group. But how are you to know that they don't go and echo those thoughts outside? And I would say personally, like for me, this has started to stretch across to my friendship groups, even when it comes to like things more than race, like other than race. And if it's a topic and somebody is saying something to disrespect another person or another people group, then I need to be like, sir, girl, like, no, like this is where it ends. I'm not gonna have you talking about this, and this. And so I would say, number one, I think the church should not be afraid to confront people. Like, if you have members of your congregation acting weird, be like Paul, because in the context of this, Peter had been with the Gentiles, like he had been bros, he had been chilling with them, and now when the Jews came, all of a sudden he's like, he doesn't want to know them, and he doesn't want to. And Paul was like, no, I'm gonna call you out in the middle of everyone. And I think that is such a beautiful thing. So I love Paul because he was just so real. He just kept it real all the time, all day, every day. Okay, sorry. But so I think definitely number one, do not be afraid to confront people. As much as you love this person, it's better that you tell them, and it's better that you help them understand. And above from that, maybe have seminars, have sessions, and start to learn about, because I think the one thing I fear is that people think that race relations will be solved over, as beautifully Kirk Franklin, he put this very beautifully, like it'll be solved over a kumbaya moment. Like we think we're just gonna say, you're gonna say sorry, I'm gonna cry, and then we're gonna go tomorrow and it won't happen. The truth is that these are generational. Like this has been going on for years and years and years and years, and I think it's a lot more than just a conversation. And another thing I would like to point out is, if you are somebody that works in a position of that you can make a change, the truth is that Black, brown, BME people, we did not make the systems. So it's funny to me that people keep looking at us to change the systems, yet one, there's not even enough of us to be in a place to change the systems, but two, it's hard for us to change systems that we didn't even have a say in creating. So I feel like the responsibility, funnily enough, like you were saying, Abby, earlier, is that maybe sometimes people want to step out of situations because they don't feel like they're understanding it. a lot of times you might be the only person that can actually make a lasting change for the situation. So act, call people out, and pray, 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 pray.
Definitely. I love that, Melissa, and I agree with everything that you said. I think to add on, I would say that there are specific needs that BAME members of the church body kind of require, and they will differ between individuals. So the first thing that I would say is that you should just ask. You should ask someone, what are your needs? And when you ask them, don't expect them to reply right then and there, but give them some time and just offer and say, if anything comes up, we're here. But I think also something that people forget is that there are certain differences between each need. So I would say as human beings, we will all have very similar needs, but how those needs are met differs between people, especially if someone is of a different culture. And like we said, you can't separate people from culture. So to give an example, so my grandmother passed away in a few years ago now, and it was a really, really difficult time because she was really young for starters. She was only 63. And when she passed away, she was in Zimbabwe. So my mom was over here. There was that kind of time delay between her being able to get back to Zim and take care of things. So when she was here, she really, really needed emotional support. And we're Christians, so where are we gonna want that support? Where's that support gonna come from? It's gonna come from the church. However, there were cultural barriers in that. So in British culture, when someone passes away in someone's family, you want to give that person space. You want to make sure that person knows that you're there to chat, but you don't want to overwhelm them. You don't want to keep bringing up their dead relative because you don't want to just upset them and things like that. While in Zimbabwean culture, the custom is that when a relative passes away, we are driving straight away to that person's house. We are sitting with that person. We are crying with them. We are staying with them for like as many days as we can in their house. Whenever we see that person, that is the first thing we bring up. We bring up their dead relative. We talk, we allow them, we give them space to express all of their emotions. So with my mom, with the pastoral team in the church, they were kind of not meeting that need for her, and she really felt alone in this period, especially as she's all the way over here and our family were dotted around everywhere, so there wasn't other people to give her that support. And where that support was meant to be coming from the church, that need that she had was not being met. And it wasn't intentional, as a lot of these things aren't. The pastoral team at the church thought that they were doing the right thing because that's the custom in British culture. But because Zim culture is different, for my mom, she felt like she was left alone in that time. So I think it's about identifying not just the different needs that people have, but also asking them, how can we meet this need that you have? Sitting down and saying, if someone in your family passes away, what is it that, how would you like us to support you? When an event happens, asking them, how is it that we can meet this need? How can we pray for you? Do you want space? Do you want us to spend more time with you? And not just assuming that you're doing things the right way for that person.
Just to add to that, like, I would encourage you guys and anybody who's listening to this as well to not be afraid to say what you do need, because like you said, the intentions were in the right place, but they just weren't aware. And I think it's a two-sided thing, like both people, you have to be willing to listen, but you also have to be willing to ask. So I would just encourage you not to be afraid to say when you need support and when it might be different from the support I might need, but just to express that.
Well, thank you guys for sharing today. Unfortunately, our time has run out. This is an amazing conversation. We were saying when we started that we're asking ourselves questions that we've never discussed before. And it's just good to get into this in the context of the church. So thank you, girls, for being here today. Can I just ask, Melissa, would you be happy to pray to close?
Yeah, sure. Dear Lord Jesus, I just want to thank you so much for Abby and Kim. I just want to thank you so much for just giving me such wonderful friends, and I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about these issues, Lord God. I pray, Lord Jesus, that you would just help us to have your heart for every brokenhearted person that we encounter in our lives. Please teach us how to effectively meet their needs, Lord God. And thank you, Lord Jesus, that the church is your bride and it is something that you are concerned about. So please, would you fix the gaps that you see, that we may not be able to see, and would you heal the brokenhearted and open the eyes of those who want to see more of what we've talked about today. In Jesus' mighty and beautiful name we pray. Amen.